The moon doesn't shine in the foggy night sky. Silence engulfs the small town. With their windows open, the peasants sleep peacefully. Suddenly, something starts moving towards the window. It gets closer and closer. As a peasant sleeps soundly, a creature enters the room. A bat. The bat hovers near the peasant's bed for a few seconds before revealing its true nature, a vampire. The vampire sucks the blood of its victim and leaves the same way that it entered the house without being noticed. The bite marks on the victim's neck remain as the only proof that the monster was there. The vampire is an extremely popular archetype in different fantasy works. The archetype is not only popular but also has an extremely rich history, as tales of monsters that drink the blood of humans are much older than it might seem at a first glance. The word vampire is believed to originate from the Proto-Slavic word upir, which possibly came from the Northern Turkic word ubir. Upir eventually became the Serbo-Croatian word vampir, which was then borrowed by the Hungarian language, then German borrowed it from the Hungarian, then French, based on German, adapted it into vampire, and then English borrowed the word from the French language. Some of the oldest documented accounts on supernatural creatures that drank human blood came from Persian pottery shards that depicted demons attempting to drink human blood. In Assyrian, Sumerian, and Babylon, the spirit/demon Lilitu was said to drink the blood of the living and eating babies. Lilitu, absorbed by Hebrew culture and learning a lot more characteristics over the years, became Lilith, the infamous snake of the Garden Eden. So, in a way, there is a possibility that she would be the first vampire besides being a primordial demon. Something to consider when creating vampire lore, but I digress. In Greek mythology, there were a few vampiric figures such as the Lamia and the Empola, that similarly to Lilith, preyed on mortals and in the case of Lamia, feasted on the children. The vampire as we know of today, however, started off with a creature from Turkish mythology, the ubir. The ubir was said to be individuals who took part in black magic and sinned severely during their lifetimes. After death, they were able to take on different animal forms, being capable of shape-shifting constantly from human to animals. They could also possess the body of the living, making them more aggressive and eventually craving to drink human blood. As time went on and it was told from mouth to mouth, the myth was slowly adapted, and was then further developed in Europe, eventually becoming the vampire, starting from the medieval age all the way to the modern age. It is believed that the vampire myth originated from attempts to rationalize phenomena related to death that were unexplained at the time, such as corpses bloating, misinterpretations of cases of premature burial, and lack of medical knowledge about diseases such as tuberculosis. Little by little, the archetype gained many characteristics over the years, culminating in the 3 literary works that became essential in establishing the figure of the vampire as we know of it today. John William Polidori's The Vampire, Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla, and Bram Stoker's Dracula. For the most part, the contemporary image of the vampire is heavily inspired by Bram Stoker's Dracula, and its subsequent adaptations in different media formats. Considered to be possibly inspired by historical figures such as Vlad the Impaler and Elizabeth Bathory, Count Dracula made it so the figure of the vampire is often a well-spoken, well-mannered, wealthy noble that rules a court and torments the peasants around them for their blood. The main characteristic of the vampire that is common to all different representations of the archetype is that they feed on the vital essence of the living. For the most part, this means that they drink the blood of their victims with the help of their pronounced fangs, but it can also include eating them or extracting their vital essence in other ways. Basically, what I mean here is that you weren't fooling anyone, Riot, especially naming him after Vlad the Impaler, believed to be one of the inspirations for Dracula. Hemomancer Maya vampires are commonly said to sleep in coffins during the day as they raise from the dead every night. They live in castles or buildings, with architecture inspired by the Gothic aesthetic. Vampires often wear capes and can shapeshift into bats and fly into the night in search for a victim to bite their necks and feed. Vampirism is often either a curse or a disease that can be passed to those that the vampire bites. If a vampire has sexual intercourse with a regular human, their children is born a vampire, a half-human, half-vampire that possesses some of the vampiric traits. The older folkloric vampires were bloated and often had purplish or darker skin colors. Over time, this shifted into the pale vampire that is better known as of today. Vampires often don't have reflections and don't cast shadows. Vampirism is often associated with supernatural and superhuman powers. Vampires are portrayed having superhuman healing capabilities, being unaffected by regular human diseases, being able to manipulate their physical forms, to move extremely fast, to jump very high, and so on. Often they are weak to sunlight, garlic, crucifixes, rosaries, and holy water, and could also be warded off with protective magic, mustard seeds on the roof, and mirrors placed in front of doors. Sometimes they also were said to not be able to enter sacred ground. Commonly, it was believed that to destroy a vampire one had to stake it, mostly through the heart, but sometimes through the mouth and the stomach. In Germany and Western Slavic areas, decapitating the vampire was the preferred method of destroying it, placing the head under the legs so it could never rise again. One thing that I always talk about in these videos is about how around the 90s and the 2000s there was a shift in the perception of the figure of the hero. The good and shiny hero started to become a little stale, and as a result the figure of the anti-hero rose to the occasion, with many mediums favoring the darker and edgier characters. From this phenomenon, many of the creatures previously only considered monstrous villains were given a chance to become the imperfect protagonists of fiction. Vampires were no exception. The Archetype provided some of the most beloved anti-heroes of all time, including none other than the prototype of his breed of vampire that can be deflected by the silver cross pendants, with blood known to revitalize the corpse of man. In some cases there are vampires that relate more to their human side and make their life mission to fight the vampires, and in other cases they are just vampires that simply aren't evil or that turned on their folk for some reason. The vampire is an abomination that defies the rules of nature, an undying, sinister creature that lurks in the dark and is fueled by the blood of man. Yet, it also often is portrayed as a seductive, well-mannered, and relatively wealthy individual that doesn't seem to stray too far from a regular human besides its particular appetite and habits. The vampire correlates to the complexes of death and the fear and curiosity surrounding its uncertain certainty. For one, it can represent the fear that cruel individuals could come back and torment others even after their deaths. Or it could be either a relief or a worry that a beloved one could be blessed or cursed with immortality, depending on one's look on the matter. It can also represent the fear of what might come after death, or the relief thinking that there is a possibility to somehow cheat death. And also the fear of the unknown, that there might be secrets out there that you didn't figure out, that there might be a secret society of blood-drinking monsters just outside your door and you didn't even notice it yet. There also tends to be a certain sexual connotation to it. As well as fantasies of transgressing regular social norms, giving in to temptation, and the desire for power and control, with a recurring theme of domination associated to it, in which case...
Hey buddy, I think you got the wrong door. The leather club's 2 blocks down.
Here comes a new challenger!
The socio-political implications are clear, considering that vampires are often inspired by Dracula, nobles and cruel rulers that are parasitical and torment the peasant mortals, in order to satisfy their needs and wills. They represent political figures and members of the upper echelons of society that amass their wealth while taking as much as they can from the working class. It also plays, like I said before, into the theme of secret societies and what the wealthy might be up to when you're not looking at them. Vampires are also often associated with serial killers and cruel rulers due to the bloodletting that they cause. The heroic vampires, on the other hand, resonate with the belief that one can always do good deeds regardless of their origin, that the will matters more than the nature, that one can overcome the limitations of the circumstances that they grew up with. The vampire archetype is a staple of fantasy settings. Sometimes stories are built upon it, other times they are just a small part of the world. Regardless, its impact on the fictional worlds where it's present is clear, as most of them are a considerable threat to the living. Built upon ancient myths, it became more and more complex as years went by, and when used right, it can make interesting settings, full of intrigue and secrecy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.